the way you think about your current work, I think applies in great journalism in politics as well. So what happens? I have that sense because I aspire to be like you in the sort of in the conversation space of like with politicians. I try to talk to people on the left and the right and do so in a nonpartisan way and criticize, but also steelman their cases. What happens, I've learned, is when you talk to somebody on the right kind of brings you in. It's like, yes, we'll keep you comfortable. Come with us, and then the left attacks you, and so. And the same happens on the left. You talk on the left, the right attacks you,
Yeah.
and the left is like, "Come with us." So like, there's a temptation and a momentum to staying to that one side, whatever that side is. The same with foreign journalism. You can cover Putin critically. There's a strong
Correct.
pull to being pro Ukraine, pro Zelensky, pro basically really covering in a favorable way to the point of propaganda, to the point of PR, the Zelensky regime. If you criticize the Zelensky regime, there's a strong pull towards then being supportive of not necessarily the Putin regime, but a very different perspective on it, which is like NATO is the one that created that war. There's narratives that pull you, and what I think a great journalist does is make enemies on both sides and walk through that fire and not get pulled in to the protection of any one side because they get so harshly attacked anytime they deviate from the center.
Well, and I think also like there's a criticism of all centrists, which I think in some way is fair. And I say that as someone largely who's a centrist, which is that this what about is, or like this, like what about the left or what about the right can skew when it's not a both sides issue. So in the case of like Russia, Ukraine, I think like I'm strongly in favor of Ukraine, even though I tend to go like on both sides. And that might be partly because one of my employees is Ukrainian. And I think what a great journalist does, especially like in politics, is I think they criticize the regime that's most in power, most controls the keys, and is the most corrupt at that time. And they might appear to be like, let's say during the realm of Trump, a great journalist would criticize Trump, but that same journalist who held Trump's feet to the fire should be capable of holding Biden's feet to the fire 4 years later, if that kind of makes sense.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So attacking any power center for the corruption, for the flaws they have,
irrespective of like your political agenda or your political ideas. Yeah.
So that's what I mean about sort of the war in Ukraine. There's several key players: NATO, Russia, Ukraine, China, India. I mean, there's several less important players, maybe some of the like Iran and like Israel and maybe Africa. And what great journalism requires is basically revealing the flaws of each one of those players, irrespective of the attacks you get. And you're right that throughout any particular situation, there is some parties that are worse than others, and you have to weigh your perspective accordingly. But also, it requires you to be fearless in certain things. Like, for example, I don't even know what it's like to be a journalist covering China now.
Oh, that's an exact case of like China has made it so difficult to be a good journalist that they've effectively squashed criticism, because to be a journalist in China means constantly risking your life every single day to criticize that government. And so the best journalists are a lot of times outside the country, or they have sources inside the country who are like, there's like this, there's layers to the journalism where there's insiders who are leaking information, but they themselves cannot publish because it's extremely risky. So yeah, I think as a society, one measure of how healthy the political structure is how well you can criticize it without fearing for your safety.
In that sense, the chaos and the bickering going on in the United States politics is a good thing. That people can criticize very harshly.
Very harshly.
And be, in terms of safety, are pretty safe.
Yes, absolutely. I think our only challenge is like where it gets dangerous is around like top secret information. The government comes down so hard that the danger in covering politics here is You can expose something that's top secret that should be exposed, and they'll ruin you.
So that's where you again give props to Snowden for stepping up.
100%. 100%.